These are the voyages of two men as they go on a discovery of the music of Star Trek. I'm Shane.
Oh, I can't talk and play at the same time. I'm Eoin. Hi.
So I'm Shane. You've probably, if you're listening to this, I work with Star Trek Eire, and I'm on a couple of other podcasts. I do Speaking Geek for Geek Ireland and Disaster Artists as well. And you'll find me on Twitter. I'm at Photo Shane C.
I'm Eoin. I don't do podcasts. I haven't done one before.
Yes,
but
that's your first one.
I am a musician. I've studied music, and I'm a fan of film scores in general, the Star Trek scores in particular. So I've just come in to talk a bit about what makes them work, what's under the hood of the car.
Of music.
Yeah, I'm also on Twitter, but I mostly just get into arguments with people about stuff that's nothing to do with music. So don't bother with that.
So don't annoy him.
Don't bother. You'd like me better in real life.
Yeah. So the big things we're going to explore into the music and the themes.
Yeah, I want to look into how it's built, how it's all put together, and how the composers have created this musical identity for Star Trek that stays fairly constant over time.
Yeah.
And Shane here will be my my test subject, my guinea pig, because Shane represents what I imagine to be like my ideal audience member, someone who enjoys music, appreciates music, enjoys Star Trek, but hasn't necessarily studied it at college, for example. So Shane will stop me if I start getting too technical.
Okay. Yeah.
You'll slow me down and make me explain stuff as
I studied film, so I'm the other way around.
Yeah. But this is all audio. This is all in your mind.
So the original idea was I asked Eoin to write an article for Star Trek Era, and Eoin started writing his article.
Yeah, but then I quickly found out that I ended up spending paragraphs trying to describe a chord or a sound. And it's just, you could just play the damn thing, and it takes half a second. So I figured this would be a lot quicker.
Yeah, well, my idea was that you would put up an article with the specific track you're talking about, and then you kind of talk people through it. But as you said, you found it far too hard. That by the time they got to the end of it, they would have listened to the track ages ago.
Yeah, and or you're having to try and guess how quickly they read, and is it the same speed as the it's just it's just a nightmare. So I'm just going to play the things. I've got my keyboard with me, so I can play as I go along. We've got a bunch of tracks on my laptop that I can play, and we can talk about how it all works.
Excellent.
So I think studying film scores is really interesting, and studying Star Trek's film scores is interesting because just imagine that Star Trek has never been made. Yeah. It hasn't been made yet, and you're back in 1966, wasn't it? 1966. Well, let's say it's 1965, and you're the composer.
Yeah.
And the producers sit you down in a room and say, hey, we want you to write music for a new show. It's set in the future. It takes place on board a starship, and the crew goes around the galaxy having adventures. Okay, and you have to write music for that. What do you do? How do you depict that in sound? And listening to film scores is fascinating because when you listen to the scores, you are listening to one very smart person's solution to those questions. Okay. So Shane, you tell me, if we were having this conversation right now and we were having it in space, what would be the most obvious difference?
There would be no sound.
Well, okay, let's say we're in this house, in this room.
Okay,
and except we were orbiting the Earth. What's the most obvious difference?
That's a really good question. I suppose it's the idea that we're weightless, so does sound travel differently?
No, sound would travel the same as long as it's in space. But we would be weightless. All of this stuff that we've got around us will be floating through the air and us along with it, and that's like the most essential idea of what it would be like to be in space. You don't know which way is up.
I suppose.
Any indications like it's above you or below you become meaningless because you don't have a fixed reference point.
Yeah.
And you can depict that in music. To show you, I'm going to show you the opposite of that. So I'm just going to play a few chords. I'm going to play a very simple sequence of notes and chords, and as soon as I stop playing, give me the first thing that comes into your head. So here we go. That's it. What's the thought? What's the thought?
Where's the rest?
Whereas, it has to. It's not over until we get to to there.
Yeah,
You can't stop on that chord. And the reason that you know that is because you've got a lifetime of exposure to other tonal music where you have keys, you've got home centers, and you can move away from them, you move back to them, you have tension, and you resolve it. And if you're in this key, we feel you can't stop until you've arrived back. You can't finish the song there. It has to resolve.
Yeah, it has to finish there.
Now, I can play music such that you don't get those cues. The reason you can tell that is because I'm playing the standard major scale. If I played a different scale, if I play a whole tone scale, you don't know which note needs to be the last one because they're all the same. Listen. Starts off the same. Now this scale could stop anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And any stopping point is as valid as the last one.
Yeah.
So this, if you like, is a bit like...
Something doesn't have to follow it.
Yeah, it's that any ending could work. There is no up, there is no down.
Yeah.
So this, if you like, is a bit like musical zero gravity.
Oh, okay.
And you'll get this a lot. You'll hear this sound of the whole tone scale very often in very cheap, hokey 1950s kind of sci-fi movies. As someone goes into space or they start dreaming and you hear this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? This is just all the whole tone scale.
Yeah.
Maybe like Wizard of Oz, someone hits their head.
Yeah.
That sound, the whole tone scale.
Topsy-turvy kind
of. Yeah, is whoa, this is all a dream. You're going into space. That the whole tone scale is what it sounds like when you don't have gravity. When you don't have that sense of here's the root, here's the tone, here's the tonic center, here's these chords have functions, but these could go anywhere, and that's musical zero gravity. So apart from being zero gravity, it's also quite a modern thing to do for the time. Western music for centuries was built on
kind of almost waltzy or something. Wasn't it?
Well, yeah,
or
but
marchy,
it was built on recognizably tonal harmonies. But composers later in the end of the 19th century and into the 20th century began messing around with sounds that were outside of that system. So as well as depicting space, he's also depicting the future. By being as up-to-date with musical trends as he can be. The problem with the whole tone scale is that it just sounds so cheesy. It's as soon as I play it, everyone laughs because it's kind of a corny sounding thing to do.
Even as early 90s, was it Wayne's World? They're like for flashbacks.
It's a cliche.
And so it's just the characters doing that with their mouth,
Yeah. So you want to get if you're the composer and you want to write music for Star Trek, you need to find a way that hints at this sense of musical zero G without going all
full on cheese.
Yeah, exactly. So here's one of the ways that Alexander Courage, who wrote the music for the original series, did it. He took what are called quartal chords. Quarter as in 4.
Okay.
Your average common or garden chord in Western music is built in thirds. We say this, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and that's a recognizable chord. Composers in the, again, late 19th, mid 20th century began experimenting with, well, what if we build a chord from some other interval? What if we use fourths instead? So instead of going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, you got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. So then we're building chords out of fourths. We call these quartal chords. And again, I could go on and no one note sound like it's going to be the last one.
Oh yeah.
Okay? Or I can expand that. It's kind of got this, it could expand infinitely and we'd never reach a logical endpoint.
Just like space.
And rather than go with whole tone scale, which he could have done, Alexander Courage went with the sound of fourths. And that's where he gets his opening motif for Star Trek. The other thing about fourths is that they were very much in vogue around the time that he was writing this. In the world of jazz, you had... just get used to this sound. It's very distinctive once you hear a few of them. Miles Davis, Kind of Blue, I think it was 1959 that record was released. The opening track, has the piano chord playing in this style. Okay, it's the Star Trek theme by having this. It's kind of up to date. It's a little bit futuristic for its time, and in fact, the theme tune is not based on, but it uses the same chords as a jazz standard called Out of Nowhere.
Oh.
Out of Nowhere is a song, I don't know when it was written, I think it was in the 50s or 60s, and it goes like... Nope. I'll play that again. Okay, Out of Nowhere. And you can take the same chords and the Star Trek theme tune will fit over them. So...
Jazz track.
Yeah, it's a really jazzy song.
Yeah.
The trouble with this, it wasn't necessarily a problem at the time, but as you move on from that a few years later, whatever is the most up to date when it's written begins to sound the most dated several years later. So if there's a problem with Alexander Courage's music, is that it's just too recognizably a product of the 1960s.
Yeah, of course.
So future composers...
At the time it was the peak of contemporary, but then it became...
even for its time, I'd say it mightn't have been sounding like, wow, it's the future. It was very fashionable.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But still, he laid the groundwork for a lot of the ideas and the motifs that would come up later. So let's listen to that track. Sound quality is a bit wavery on these old files. There's your fourth theme. Okay. So he's giving you that sense of infinite space, stretching out into eternity. You've got all the narration going on with this. Yeah. Even you've got a soprano solo singing over the top. Yeah. I mean, it's very like
that real jazzy.
This could also be the theme tune to the Jetsons. You know, it's very very much of its time.
Yeah. Pretty cheesy, but it's good.
So that's the theme tune from the original series. There are a few other things that are worth noticing there, like how it begins with a wide leap. You've got this...
Oh, yeah, it's a big skip.
It's a big skip because how do you get to space? You'd have to take a very big jump to get there.
And I suppose, and then they were doing in Star Trek, they're punching the warp like straight away. So it's from zero to way over there.
A big leap sounds confident. You know, if you're going to start playing a piece and you go... Well, it's got a clear sense of direction to it.
It's adventurous as
it's
well.
Adventure. It's leaping out into the unknown. And also, if you were to play your fourths motif, I'm going to call this the fourths motif from now on. Take out the middle note.
Oh, okay. Very good,
he's outlining that. So it's he's outlining that motif with the first two notes of the theme. So that it binds the music together on that level.
Yeah. Interesting.
So
I just love that. Like, it's funny because they were kind of going for this sense of the future, and then now it's just so 60s.
Yes.
So especially once the sopranos come in, it's just like
Yeah. In fact, the song
is really croaky.
The song originally had words as well. Gene Roddenberry wrote a set of words to that.
Oh yeah.
And luckily they were never used. Otherwise, I think it might have tipped the balance too far over. But originally, the words were "Beyond the rim of the starlight, my love is wandering in star flight. I know he'll find in star-clustered reaches love, strange love, a star woman teaches." It's just really cringy. Luckily, they didn't make it. But the groundwork for the music, while it is cliched, it is very much of its time. It's there for the future composers to use.
You can really see what he was trying to do with it. He was putting in those leaps and getting that fastness and that weightlessness scale and stuff. You could tell there's a lot of thought put into that. It wasn't just we'll bang it at the team.
He wasn't
sci-fi.
Yeah, thing, sure. Yeah. Well, who knows? I mean, these guys were working on a lot of things at one time. When Alexander wrote this tune, he didn't know this was going to be part of a franchise that would endure for decades.
Oh, right. Okay.
He could well have bashed this out one afternoon. I don't know, but these guys are working at a high level. They can.
Yeah.
This all becomes automatic after a while. What intervals have what convey certain thoughts or ideas. But for the future composers, which is what we'll look at next, they had to take the spirit of the theme and continue to illustrate the same ideas, but do it in a way that didn't sound dated. So that's the next challenge that we'll look at.
Yeah, okay, good. So that's it for this one. Sorry, give me the composer's name again.
That was Alexander Courage.
So Alexander Courage, what a great name. Fantastic. So for that one, that's it from me, Shane.
Oh, and me. Oh, I'm dozed off there.
Bye.
Thank you.